Toya was an ordinary gooner like you until he was accidentally isekai'd by God. To make up for it, he is sent to another world with an overpowered smartphone and abilities that help him rizz up magical baddies and crack everyone.
Yeah, boy.
It all begins when Toya meets God in the spirit realm, who apologizes for accidentally unaliving him with a lightning bolt he intended to use on Diddy instead. To make up for his mistake, God offers to resurrect him in a magical world and asks him wish for anything he wants. So Toya asks God to make him able to use his cheap Samsung phone in the new world, but God is surprised that he didn't wish for something bigger, like a harem of billionaire goth girls. After granting his wish, God sends him to the fantasy world, and when Toya wakes up, he gets a call from God, who informs him that he's installed an isekai version of Google Maps in his phone to help with navigation. Using the map, Toya starts making his way to the kingdom, but he's worried that he can't buy any food because the $2 in his wallet are useless in the fantasy world. However, a merchant suddenly jumps out of his carriage and offers to pay Toya 50 bitcoins for his unique clothes. Soon after, Toya and the merchant arrive at a store to make the trade, after which, the merchant directs him to an inn nearby. On the way, Toya sees some hoodlums bullying two sisters for a special antler, so he interrupts and asks the girls to sell him the antler for a gold coin. Once they agree, Toya shatters the antler and explains to the bozos that he could do what he wants with it since he bought it. However, the ruffians get annoyed and try to attack him, but he awakens the abilities that God bestowed on him, allowing him to see their attack in slow motion and easily knock them out. Afterwards, he hands the elder sister the gold coin, and she introduces herself as Elze and her younger sister as Linze. He then tells them that he's looking for an inn, and they realize that it's the same inn they're staying at, so they take him there. The next morning, the girls take Toya to the guild so he can make some cash, and they pick a quest which asks them to defeat some monsters in the forest. However, Toya realizes that he doesn't have a weapon, so the girls help him buy a sword at a weapons store, and afterwards, they head to the forest together. There, some wolves surround them, but Elza knocks one away with her Temu Infinity Gauntlet, and Toya destroys a second one with a wind-breathing slash, while Linze barbecues a third wolf with a powerful fire-bending spell. After the battle, they submit the horns of the wolves to the receptionist, and she hands them their prize money. Shortly afterwards, Toya asks the girls to teach him how to read and write, so Elze appoints Linze to be his tutor, since she's as smart as Senku. And Toya also asks her to teach him magic. Linze then displays her water magic using a crystal, but when Elze tries, nothing happens, so Linze explains to Toya that Elze can't use water magic because she only has aptitude for fortification magic. Hearing this, Toya decides to give it a try, and on his first attempt, he spills more liquid than Johnny Sins in your favorite Brazzers video, which shocks the girls. Minutes later, Toya tries magic with every other type of crystal and succeeds in casting powerful spells with each of them, which shocks the girls since he's the first person to achieve this feat. Toya then notices a strange crystal among the stack, so Linze explains that it's a spell stone for null magic, which is a special kind of magic that doesn't have any chance, and mentions a null magic spell called Gate, which allows one to travel long distances. Toya finds this ability useful, so he gives it a try, and a portal suddenly appears in the air. As they look through the portal, Toya notices that it leads to the forest they explored earlier, so Linze explains that the Gate spell only links the user to places they've been. When they return to the inn, the sisters glaze Toya for being able to use all elements, but the innkeeper interrupts and introduces him to a chef named Ale, who asks them for advice on a dessert that women would enjoy, so Toya recommends that she try ice cream. However, none of the girls knows what ice cream is, so he pulls out his phone to show them, and when they ask what the phone is, he lies that it's a magical item which only he can use. Using a recipe from ChatGPT, Toya leads the girls in making ice cream, and they're all amazed by the taste, so Ale decides to add it to her menu. A few days later, Toya is riding on a carriage, and he notices that Elze is sleeping, so he takes a photo of her to use for his midnight gooning session. They soon arrive in a new city, and Toya suggests finding an inn for the night since they still have a long way to go before reaching the royal capital. He then points out that it would have been better for them to go for a job listing, which asked them to hunt some slimes instead of their current quest, to deliver a letter to the royal capital, but both sisters disagree because they find slimes disgusting since they melt clothes. Elze then decides to get some food before going to the inn, and Toja suggests using his gate to teleport them to the inn, but the girls refuse, claiming that it's better to explore unfamiliar places in a new town. Just then, Toya notices that there's a commotion going on nearby, and when they move in to investigate, they see a samurai girl named Yae surrounded by some hoodlums who want payback for their partners she slimed out. As they attack, Yae takes them down with swift martial arts moves, which the girls haven't seen before, and Toya notices that she's using jujitsu. However, Yae's stomach starts growling, so she grabs it, and a hoodlum tries to ambush her, but Toya binds him with one of Gaara's techniques and sends him flying with a kick. Elsa joins the action by knocking down a bunch of the gangsters using Bruce Lee moves, but the city guards start approaching, so Toya grabs Yae and runs away with the girls. They soon arrive at an alley, where Yae reveals that she's from a town called Yashin, and since Toya also has two names, she assumes that he's from there as well, but he explains that he's from a different country. He then asks Yae why she looked unsteady during the first, so she explains that she's been hungry since she lost her travel funds on the way there. Hearing this, they take her to a restaurant where she stuffs her face with noodles while explaining to them that she's traveling to improve her martial arts because she comes from a family of warriors. Linze asks what she plans to do, so Yae explains that she plans to head to the royal capital to test her strength. And Elsa sees this as a pleasant coincidence since her party is also headed there for work, so she asks Yae to come with them, and Yae agrees. When Linze asks Toya if he's okay with it, he says he's okay with it, but he low-key worries that this sword-brained glutton will eat up their entire food budget. On the way there, Toya is surprised that the samurai girl can ride horses as well, so she explains that she trained in equestrian arts, and this makes Elsa happy because moving around was hard when it was just herself and Linze. Hearing this, Toya starts feeling useless, so the sisters remind him that he's an overpowered mage who can use all elements and even cast any null spell, so long as he knows the name and the details about its effects. As Toya studies a grimoire, Linze explains that there are as many types of null magic as there are users, but only a handful of people know and can use the null magic. In the book, he finds a spell to draw distant objects to his hand, and he realizes that it's useful, so Linze tells him to give it a try. When he activates the spell, nothing happens, and he explains to the sisters that he was trying to surprise Yae by pulling her katana, but they guess that it was too heavy for the spell to work. With this in mind, he tries again, and this time, he successfully snatches the ribbon from Yae's hair. So Linze informs him that the spell could be convenient or terrifying, depending on how it's used. This confuses Toya, so Elsa explains that it can be used for pickpocketing, and Toya agrees, so they beg him not to try it. However, the dimwit mentions that it can be used to snatch plot covers, and this makes them so terrified that they scoot away from him. While studying the grimoire, Toya tries out a spell called Long Sense, and when Elsa asks what it does, he explains that it allows him to see and hear things from a distance, so she warns him not to use it for peeping. Suddenly, Toya picks up the scent of blood nearby, so he tells Yae to go full steam ahead. In the forest, some monsters are attacking some adventurers, while the dark wizard that controls them watches, but Linze arrives and roasts one of the monsters with a flame spell, allowing Elsa to knock down some other monsters. Yae joins the fight by swiftly slicing a bunch of monsters in half, but all her aura points go down the drain as she trips on a rock and falls on the ground. A monster tries to attack her, but Toya uses a null spell to make the monster fall, and this allows her to stab it to death. Suddenly, some more monsters appear, and the ladies engage them in battle, but they soon notice that the dark mage is summoning more lizardmen, so Toya makes him fall asleep. After tying up the wizard, the adventurers thank Toya's party for saving them, but they suddenly hear a voice call for help in their carriage, so they rush over there and see a girl crying over her butler, who was stabbed. Toya asks Linze to use healing magic on him, but she explains that she can't save him that way because an arrow is stuck inside his body. However, Toya uses the telepathic drawing spell named Aports to pull the arrow into his hands, and then uses light magic to heal the old butler, causing everyone to celebrate. Shortly after, the butler, Lime, thanks Toya for saving him, and his master introduces herself as the Duke's daughter, Sua, but Toya is confused as to why everyone is bowing to her, so Linze explains that she's the king's niece. Lime then asks Toya and his party to guard them for the rest of their journey in exchange for a handsome reward, and they all agree. They soon arrive at the capital of Belfast's kingdom, Alephis, which looks just as beautiful as Asgard. Eventually, they reach the palace, where Sue's father, Alfred, thanks Toya for saving his daughter. A while later, Toya asks Alfred if he knows who the attackers were, and he explains that they're his ops who are using underhanded tactics to try to get him out of power. He then reveals that his wife, Ellen, is blind, and their attempts to use healing magic to save her failed, which is why he wants Sue to learn her grandfather's special magic, which can remove afflictions from people. However, the girls realize that Toya can handle it, so they take him to Ellen's room, and he uses a null spell to restore her vision, leading to a tearful reunion with her family. As a reward, Alfred hands Toya enough money to buy 4 Tesla Cybertrucks and some medals which show that his duchy supports their party. After leaving the manor, Yae decides to join Toya's party, and the sisters cheerfully accept her. A while later, Toya and the girls are walking through town, and Elsa suggests that they do some shopping before returning home, so everyone agrees. Toya notices some humans with dog features around the area, so Lindsay explains that they're demi-humans who exist in several varieties, including elves, dwarves, beastmen, and fairies. However, they notice a demi-human girl named Alma looking troubled nearby, so Toya moves in to check on her, but his negative riz makes her leap away. He explains that he was just trying to find out what's bothering her, so with teary eyes, she explains that she's lost after getting separated from her companion, and Toya offers to guide her with his Isekai GPS. Shortly afterwards, Toya's party helps Alma reunite with her big sister, Oriega, and she thanks them for helping her little sister before waving them goodbye. As they walk ahead, Elsa suggests that they go shopping, but Toya explains that going everywhere as a group would be difficult and suggests that they split up and meet at the inn in 2 hours' time. Hours later, the girls are all standing outside the inn, feeling grumpy that their leader is running late, and when Toya arrives, he checks his phone and realizes that he's 25 minutes late. Yae is surprised that he can tell time with the phone, so he lies that it's his own personal null magic. However, Elsa addresses the elephant in the room by asking him why he's wearing a cheap espada coat, so he explains that the coat increases his magic resistance and affinities, and the other girls start glazing his looks until he gets flustered and runs away. A while later, Toya is watching the owner of the inn, Doran, play shogi with his fellow musclehead named Beryl, using a board he created with a special wood carving spell called modeling. Beryl then asks him to make another shogi set for them, and Toya agrees, but the Battle of the Boneheads starts getting too heated, so Doran's daughter, Mika, scolds them. Toya asks Mika where the girls are, so she informs him that Lindsay is playing with her cookie in her room while the other two went out to buy the new dessert he introduced, and he's shocked that they went out in the rain for such a trivial thing. Just then, Yae and Elsa arrive with a bunch of snack packs, and Elsa asks Toya to deliver one of the packs to the Duke, so he agrees to do so. After he delivers the goods, Sue feasts on the roll cake faster than your mom did the plumber's eggplant, and Alfred says he'd be interested in buying them every day if he had the gate spell, so Toya offers to give them the recipe. Alfred also shows interest in the shogi board Toya created, so Toya explains that it's a 2-player game where a player tries to capture the enemy's king first, and Alfred decides to play against him. While playing, Alfred gets fascinated by the military structure of the game, and Sue starts begging to play, but he ignores her, so she starts pestering Toya. Eventually, the day goes dark, and Sue has fallen asleep, but Alfred still begs to play more rounds of shogi with Toya, making Toya realize that he's cooked. The next morning, Toya and the girls arrive at the Royal Capitals Guild, and Toya picks a quest which requires them to hunt down mega slimes, but the girls refuse because they don't want to end up in freaky positions, so he suggests another quest. They soon arrive at the quest site, where they engage in battle against a monster in dark armor, and Elsa uses her kung fu moves to knock the beast down, but it gets back up and starts attacking again, so Toya asks Lindsay to freeze its legs with ice magic. As Yae and Elsa overwhelm the monster with attacks, Lindsay casts an ice spell, which holds the monsters in place, allowing Toya to fire a spam of lightning arrows, which vaporize the beast. After the battle, the girls tell Toya about a treasure which no one has been able to find in the area, so he activates his search spell and finds something big in the ruins nearby. When Toya leads them to the treasure spot, they see that it's covered in heavy rubble, so Lindsay blows up the rubble with an explosion spell, allowing them to enter the dungeon underneath. Since the dungeon is dark, Lindsay casts a light spell to give them vision, and as they explore the dungeon, they find some weird text on the wall, which Lindsay can't read. Upon taking a closer look, she realizes that it's an ancient magic text, and Toya takes a picture of it just to be safe, but his flashlight scares the girls, so he explains that it's just a feature on his phone. They soon find an earth spell stone buried nearby, and Lindsay explains that it was a trap set up to activate a spell if mana is passed through it, so Else asks Toya to pass some mana into it, since he's the only one with earth affinity. Once he does, the door opens up dramatically, and they enter the treasure room, where they find a strange, dusty item. As Toya inspects it, he notices that it's made of glass, and there's a strange red orb inside it. Lindsay's light spell starts fading, and they notice that the orb in the artifact is absorbing the light from her spell. Suddenly, the object transforms into a monster, which emits a loud sonic wave around the room, and the building starts crumbling, so Toya uses a gate spell to lead the girls out of the dungeon. However, the monster jumps to the surface and starts attacking them, and Lindsay blasts it with flame spells, but it absorbs her magic. Seeing this, Yae charges in with a sword strike, but her blade can't penetrate its shell, and it launches her away. Elze tries some physical attacks of her own, but the beast tanks it and starts spinning like a Beyblade, forcing Elze to jump away. Toya uses his slip spell to make the monster lose balance, and then explains to Lindsay that she can only affect the monster with magic if she uses indirect attacks. With this in mind, she pins the monster down with a large block of ice, and Elze delivers a powerful kick, which shatters the ice block and cuts off its legs. However, the monster regenerates its legs and injures Elze while unleashing a flurry of powerful strikes. As the other girls keep the creature occupied, Toya heals Elze and starts brainstorming about how to bypass the beast's regeneration, until he realizes that the battle is similar to Shogi, which gives him an idea. After sharing his plan with Elze, he uses his apport spell to steal the monster's core, and then launches it towards Elze, who destroys it with a Detroit smash, causing the monster to crumble to dust. That evening, they tell the Duke about the battle, and he asks them to help out in investigating the ruins. The next morning, Toya is exploring the yard when Alfred arrives and informs him that his brother has been poisoned. While riding in the carriage, Alfred explains to Toya that his brother was poisoned by nobles who oppose trade with the kingdom of Mislead, which is a newly established kingdom being ruled by a beastman. Alfred suspects that someone is gunning for power because if the king dies, the throne passes on to his eldest daughter, Yumina, making it possible for someone to gain power through political marriage. When Toja asks what he can do, Alfred says he wants him to use the recovery spell he used on Ellen to extract the poison from his body. They soon arrive at the castle, where they meet a bald dude as chopped as Shrek named Count Balsa, who wears a smug smile while telling Alfred that they've captured the culprit behind the king's attack, and he suggests cutting off trade with Mislead since his so-called culprit is an ambassador of that nation. However, Alfred refuses and tells him that it's the king who will make that call, and Balsa accuses him of gooning to beastmen, so Toya secretly uses his slip spell to make the old fool fall from the stairs. In the bedroom, the king is fighting for his life, while all his family members panic beside him. But Alfred suddenly arrives with Toya and gives him the go-ahead, so Toya activates his recovery spell on the king. Seeing this, the people around are shocked because recovery is a spell that's as rare as the 6 eyes in their world, but it works out perfectly, as the king regains his energy. When the king asks who Toya is, Alfred introduces him as the Gigachad who restored Ellen's eyesight, and as he thanks Toya, Yumina starts blushing while planning to taste his white sauce. A general named Leon starts glazing Toya as the next Harry Potter, but a green-haired baddie stops him and introduces herself as Charlotte, the royal family's first mage, before pestering him to know more about his magic. Yumina thanks Toya for saving her dad, but he doesn't understand why she's staring at him like a hungry mountain lion, so she asks him if he's a lolicon. Meanwhile, the king is crashing out on his bed about the crimes of his opponents, but Leon explains that they have proof because many people saw him collapse after drinking the wine sent by the ambassador, so he suggests meeting with the ambassador. Soon after, Orega arrives at the palace, and the king is surprised that Toya knows her, so he explains that he helped her younger sister a while ago before asking to see the room where the king collapsed. On arriving there, Toya activates his search spell in poison mode, and this gives him a clear picture of what happened, so he asks Leon to summon the king, his party, and Count Balsa. Once they arrive, Toya drops the famous line from every murder mystery, saying that the culprit is among them, and he's happy that he crossed it off his bucket list. Balsa claims that the culprit is Oriega, but the wannabe Sherlock Holmes informs everyone that he's prepared a bottle of wine that doesn't have any poison to use for verification, and asks Leon to confirm that it isn't poisoned. After he does, Toya pours the wine into the king's glass and asks Balsa to give it a try, but the salty moron starts panicking, so Toya reminds him that they've confirmed it isn't poisonous. He still hesitates to take the wine, so Leon pressures him until he finally takes the drink, and after drinking it, he starts freaking out, claiming that he's been poisoned. However, Toya tells him that he's already wiped the poison off the glass and explains to everyone that the poison didn't come from Oriega, but rather the king's wine glass, because all of the king's glass cups have been laced with poison. Hearing this, Yumina starts glazing Toya, and Balsa tries to run away, but Toya stops him with a slip spell, making Yumina fall even deeper in love with him. Shortly afterwards, the king thanks Toya for saving his life, but Yumina can't resist Toya's Sigma energy, so she tells her parents that she wants to marry him, causing him to spill his tea. When the king asks why, she explains that Toya is a kind-hearted man with a 10-inch sausage, which she'd give anything to devour, and everyone agrees to let the marriage happen, except for Toya, who argues that it's too soon since they barely know him. However, the king explains that Yumina knows he's a good person because she has an ability called the Mystic Eyes of Intuition, which allows her to see into one's character. Toya then brings up the fact that he isn't of age yet, so the king decides that he'll spend 2 years getting to know her, and afterwards, he'll decide whether to go through with the marriage or not. Once Toya agrees, the queen motivates Yumina to use all her OnlyFans tactics to win Toya's heart, so she holds his hand and smiles, while saying she's looking forward to it. A while later, Toya is resting on the bed when he gets a call from God, who congratulates him on the marriage, but he complains that he doesn't want to go through with it, so God informs him that it's a polygamous world where he can marry as many wives as he wants. The next morning, Yumina is cuddling Toya's arm at the dining table, but the girls are shocked that Toya ditched them to get married to a blonde loli, so Yumina introduces herself and reveals that she'll be staying with them from that day forward. She then informs them that she plans to register with the guild and join them in hunting monsters, and Toya tries to remind her that she's a princess, but she tells him not to call her that. As they flirt with each other, Elze asks if Toya would become king after the marriage, but Yumina's face turns red while she explains that their son would be the one to succeed the throne. Soon after, they explore the forest together, and Yumina summons some wolves and commands them to find their targets, so Toya asks her to teach him summoning magic after the mission. Just then, some monster apes appear, so Toya stops one with a slip spell, and Yumina fires an arrow directly into the second one, allowing Yae to behead the third monster. Lindsay then roasts a bunch of them with a flame spell, and their comrades try to get revenge, but Toya stops one with his slip spell, and Elze knocks out his partner with a brutal punch. As more monsters appear, Yumina and Lindsay unleash a lightning and fire spell in perfect unison, and destroy all the remaining monsters. A while later, Yumina teaches Toya summoning magic, and he successfully summons a white tiger, but Yumina trembles in fear while telling him that he just summoned the highest class of beast, called a heavenly beast. The beast asks him to pour some magic into it to test his abilities, but once he does, his overwhelming powers knock the tiger out. When the tiger regains consciousness, she asks him to name her to complete the task, so he names her Kohaku, and she transforms into a cute cat form. The next day, Toya is riding in a carriage with the girls, but they're all feeling down, so he reminds them that it's their first mission since Kohaku joined them. However, the girls complain that they were sent to hunt down some slimes and investigate a slime researcher's castle, but Kohaku doesn't understand why they hate slimes, so Yumina explains that slimes, especially the green ones, would normally melt away their clothes. The girls suggest leaving the slimes alone since they aren't attacking nearby villages, but Toya does his best Donald Trump impression while telling them that it's their duty as adventurers to make sure the villagers don't live in fear. They soon arrive at the castle, and Toya tries to give them instructions, but his aura goes negative when a metal pot falls on his head and resets his brain. Shockingly, the pot transforms into a slime, and since they've never seen that kind of slime before, they assume that it was newly created, and Lindsay suggests that they take a look at the researcher's documents. While searching the library, Yumina finds a book, but sees that it's only a cover because its contents have been eaten by slimes. However, Lindsay shows them a book which hasn't been eaten, and it contains the properties of many different slimes, so Toya suggests taking it with them since it could be useful. They soon enter a room which is flooded with green slime, and Lindsay tries to annihilate them with a hollow purple, but Toya stops her by reminding her that she could destroy the entire building, and he tells Kohaku to handle it, so she transforms into her tiger form. With a single roar, she sends all the slimes flying into a wall, but the slimes return to attack them, so they run upstairs. However, they notice that the slimes aren't climbing the stairs to chase them, and Elsa tries to move ahead, but she slips and falls on a fluid that feels like Diddy oil, coming from the slimes above. Toya doesn't understand what's going on, so Lindsay explains from the book that the slimes above are called lotion slimes, and their bodies secrete a lubricating fluid when they sense danger, but since they're harmless to humans, they're labeled in the book as failed creations. Suddenly, they all slip on the slime lotion and fall back downstairs, where the green slimes start feasting on the outfits of the girls until Toya teleports them to a different floor with a gate spell. As he tries to check on them, he sees that their plots are all partially exposed, and his brain starts twitching, so Elsa knocks him back to his senses. On their way out, Toya explains that the scientists produced some mass failures while trying to create a slime as powerful as Rimuru, and Elsa suggests burning the building to the ground, a motion which the other girls agree to. They suddenly run into some statues with large melons, and Toya notices that their plots are moving, so he lets his intrusive thoughts win and plays with them. However, they suddenly fall off and turn to slimes, so Lindsay explains that they're plot slimes, who attach themselves to the plots of women, and they typically prefer smaller ones. Just then, two of the plot slimes jump in to attack Lindsay, so she annihilates them with a wind spell and explains to Toya that her marshmallows are still growing. Afterwards, they enter the researcher's room, where his corpse is lying on the ground, and Toya finds a note which states that he succeeded in making his ultimate creation. Suddenly, some slimes arrive and transform into bare-plotted ladies, so the girls cover Toya's eyes and knock him out. Soon after, the girls burn the building to the ground, and Toya realizes that all the scientists wanted was to enjoy receiving Hawktua from his harem of slime girls, but he finds this dumb. Kohaku then asks to explore the human town with him, so he holds her while exploring the street, and they find a lost girl crying for her mom. However, Toya drops Kohaku in front of her, so she finally calms down, and Toya uses an upgraded version of the search ability to pinpoint the location of her mom. After sending her to her mom, Toya explains to Ye that he used an enchant spell to combine his search spell and his smartphone's ability, allowing him to search for anything in the world, and Yae asks him to use it in searching for her brother. At the diner, Toya asks her why she wants to search for her brother, so she explains that she hasn't seen him for a long time. After she describes him, Toya uses his phone search to find him and tells her that he's moving around, so she starts yapping about how much she admires her brother. She then mentions that her brother behaves a lot like Toya, but she gets flustered and starts yapping nonsense while strangling Kohaku. Later that evening, Toya activates his long sense ability using his phone, but it suddenly displays a live video of Lindsay changing, which makes him so flustered that he turns it off. However, Lindsay enters his room, and he starts stuttering like an idiot while asking what she wants. So she informs him that she went to the antique shop to learn more spells, since many of her spells couldn't harm the slimes. She then shows him a scroll she found in the store, which has ancient text on it, so Toya transforms some items into a pair of glasses and enchants them with a reading ability. Once Lindsay puts it on, she's surprised that she can now read the ancient texts, and she finds a spell on the scroll called Bubble Bomb, so she spends the rest of the day practicing the spell until she passes out from lack of mana. The next day, Lindsay continues practicing the spell, but just as she starts running out of mana, Toya uses a spell called Transfer to replenish her mana, so she thanks him before making another attempt. However, the spell flops, and she explains to Toya that magic can only work when one can visualize a spell, but she can't pull off a bubble bomb because she can't imagine it. Hearing this, Toya advises her to imagine a soap bubble, so she does so while activating the spell, and this time, she successfully launches a bubble bomb into a tree. The next day, Elsa is feeling down that her gauntlet got damaged after a monster fight with the team, and Toya advises her to get a replacement, so she asks him to take her to the capital to buy it. After buying the gauntlet, Elsa starts gawking over a Disney princess outfit in a mall, so Toya drags her in to try out the outfit. Once she does, he praises her looks and tells her that he's buying it for her as a present. When they return to the inn, the other girls praise her looks as well, and Yumina informs Toya that the king has invited him to the castle to make him a knight as a reward for his heroic efforts. Days later, the entire squad is shocked by the sight of a new dazzling mansion, and Toya explains that he was given the mansion by the king after declining the offer for knighthood. When they enter, the girls are amazed that it's fancier than the Playboy mansion, but Toya complains that the house would be too large for 5 people to manage, which shocks the girls. Yae asks Toya if it's okay for them to live with him, and he says it's okay. but the white-haired sisters claim that it's not right for them to stay there because they feel the king gave him the manor so he could have enough space to crack Yumina in 100 positions. However, Toya says it's fine because he considers all of them his family, but their faces suddenly turn red from embarrassment and they run away to cool off. Yumina is happy that Toya sees all 4 of them as his family because she had no intention of keeping his massive eggplant all to herself, and she cheerfully runs off to talk to the others. A while later, Toya is chilling in the yard, and the girls ask if it's really okay for them to stay at the mansion with him. He nods in approval, so Yumina cheerfully tells them that they can now move forward with the plan they discussed. Inside the mansion, a butler named Liam introduces them to the 2 maids that would be working at the mansion named Lapis and Cecile, as well as 4 others who will serve as security guards. Yumina reveals that Liam has been caring for her father for many years, and Toya is surprised that such an important man is at his home. So Liam explains that he's passed on his duties in the king's service to his son because he wants to spend his life serving the man who saved his younger brother, Lime. Toya agrees to hire him, so he commands all the workers to get to work immediately and informs Toya that Sue has arrived to see him. They have a tea party together, where they playfully talk about Toya's engagement with Yumina, and Alfred asks Toya if he'd be willing to get married to Sue as well. But Toya tells him not to get carried away, so he stands down. Alfred then informs him that their kingdom has decided to ally with the kingdom of mislead, and they need to prepare a location for both kings to meet, but traveling to one nation would be dangerous, so they need Toya to assist them with his gate ability. However, Toya says he can only transport himself to places he's been before, so Alfred suggests that he travel to mislead. The next day, some soldiers from mislead arrive, and their commander introduces himself as Garen. The Belfast Knight Squad also arrives, and their leader introduces himself as Lion. So Origa explains that soldiers from both nations will guard the team until they reach the capital of mislead. While looking through the map, Garen explains the route which they'll take to reach mislead, and Lion promises them that he'll protect them with his life. During camp that evening, Toya is telling everyone how horrible the Game of Thrones finale was, but suddenly, one of the Beastmen guards informs them that several people are approaching, and Garen guesses that they are highway bandits. Using his phone's map, Toya finds out that there are 28 bandits in total approaching them, and he uses Isekai Bluetooth to paralyze them from afar. After rounding up all the bandits, Toya asks the knights what to do, so Lion suggests dispatching a mounted runner to fetch the guards. However, once Origa approaches Lion, he gets flustered and jumps away like a brain-dead rabbit. After he leaves, Toya starts making fun of the lover boy, and the girls point out that Origa is aware of his feelings because his trouser snake jumps whenever he sees her. The next day, Toya catches Lion red-handed trying to pick a gift to rizz up Origa, but he lies that it's for his mother, so Toya gives the poor fool an assist by baiting Alma into revealing the kind of jewelry that her sister likes. Hours later, they arrive at the shores of a new town, and Toya piggybacks Lindsay since she has seasickness, so Origa suggests taking a break. But Lindsay comes down and assures her that she's fine. As they joke around, Kohaku informs Toya that someone has masked their presence while observing them, so Toya decides to keep an eye out. Yumina then glazes the flower on Origa's hair and starts giving her tips on how to repay the man who gifted her with a sloppy toppy, but Toya tells them that it's time to move ahead. While riding in the carriage, Toya searches for a spot to set up camp, and Origa informs him that there are magic beasts in the forest, but he explains that no magic beast will come close to her since Kohaku is around. That evening, the girls inform Toya that the animals in the forest have suddenly started crying out, and they see that a dragon has appeared in the skies. Origa explains that dragons live in the sacred grounds at the center of their nation, and they never leave that area unless there's an intruder. When Toya checks his map, he sees that the dragon is headed for a place called El Village, so he asks Yumina to stay back and take care of the others while he and the other warriors head to the village. There, Toya blasts the dragon with a lightning javelin spell, but it dodges and starts raining fire blasts on him, so he and Lindsay ride away on Kohaku's back. They lead him outside the village, and Toya overwhelms it with lightning attacks, which drive it to the ground, allowing Lindsay to slice off its wings with a water spell. However, the dragon starts spamming flame blasts at them, but the other two girls arrive and land powerful hits on its body. Toya tries to land the finishing slash, but his sword breaks on impact with the beast's skin, so he takes it down with a slip spell and gives the girls some new bottle orders. Following his orders, Lindsay creates a large ice wall, and Toya transforms it into a large lens, which he uses to fire a concentrated blast that turns the dragon into a donut. Suddenly, a red dragon appears and apologizes for his comrade's misbehavior before introducing himself as Seryu. Since Kohaku is familiar with him, she introduces Toya as her master, so he apologizes to him and agrees to tell the other dragons to never start a fight again before leaving. The next morning, Toya wakes up, and he's shocked to see that Yumina is letting him rest on her lap, but the other girls start feeling salty, so Yumina reminds them that she won the right to claim him for the night in a fair game of rock, paper, scissors. While watching everyone work, Lion tells Garen that he's shocked Toya defeated a dragon alone and cast recovery magic on everyone in the affected village. But Garen says he's more surprised that Toya's team is donating the highly valuable dragon parts to the rebuilding of the village instead of gambling on chicken races. The village chief, Solemn, thanks Toya for his heroic efforts and hands him one of the fangs from the dragon corpse to use in making a replacement for his damaged weapon, but Toya notices that it's surprisingly light. Solemn then hands him a blade they found in the dragon's eye, and this makes Toya remember a moment during the fight where a blade flew from nowhere and stabbed the dragon in the eye. Later, in the carriage, Toya asks Kohaku if there was anyone else present during their dragon fight, and she admits that she sensed two people within the groves of the trees, but she didn't tell him because she thought they were villagers. They soon arrive at Nismedi's royal capital, Burje, and they head to the throne room, where the king praises the escorts for successfully guarding the team to their city. He then asks about the dragon that was slain, so Yumina explains that it was Toya's party that did it before introducing herself as the Princess of Belfast. This shocks the king, and when he asks why she's there, she tells him that their kingdom's alliance with Mislead is really important to them before handing him a letter written by her father. However, the king, Arnold, is so fascinated by the fact that Toya defeated a dragon that he challenges him to a duel. At the arena, Arnold's advisor, John, explains to Toya that Arnold is a battle junkie who always challenges people he believes are strong and motivates him to beat the piss out of their king. As both fighters take their place, the official announces that the match will continue until someone receives a fatal wound or the opponent admits defeat, and even though the use of magic is allowed, they're prohibited from using offensive magic that directly targets their opponents. King Arnold starts bragging about how he intends to no-diff Toya, but once the battle begins, Toya activates his slip spell, and the king falls like a total moron. Since Toya has won the duel, he starts power walking away, but Arnold calls him back and asks him to have a rematch without using the slip spell. During their second match, Arnold and Toya clash their wooden swords, and Toya tries to fire a sand spell, but the king shoves him back, so he activates multiple magic circles. However, the attack was only a bluff, and when he attempts his real attack, Arnold dodges swiftly and attacks him from behind, but Toya dodges as well. The king is amazed that Toya was able to dodge his attack, and the girls are stunned upon realizing that Arnold has a null magic spell. He explains to Toya that his null magic, Axel, allows him to increase his agility, but he can't keep it constantly active since it consumes a lot of mana, and Toya admits that it's an impressive spell. However, Toya gives him the shock of his life by activating the spell himself, and the two of them engage in a high-speed sword battle on par with Ichigo vs Aizen, but Toya kicks things into higher gear by applying a boost spell to his Excel magic. They clash for several more seconds before Toya checkmates the king, and everyone applauds the overpowered Gigachad, including the Fraud King himself. Later that evening, everyone is enjoying themselves at a royal party, and Lion meets Toya to ask where Origa is, but Toya says he has no idea. However, they notice everyone gawking at something nearby, and when they take a closer look, they see Origa wearing a dress more beautiful than Sabrina Carpenter's Met Gala outfit. Just then, Arnold arrives and tells Toya he looks good in the Mislead outfit he's wearing, and the girls show off their pretty outfits as well, so he takes a picture of them with his phone. The flashlight scares the guards into pulling their swords, but Arnold signals them to halt and asks what the phone is, so Toya explains that it's a device he can use to capture and save things. Arnold asks if he can take out pictures as well, and Toya confirms that he can do that, as long as he has a piece of paper he can transfer it to. Toya demonstrates using a sheet of paper, and Arnold is so impressed with the picture that he asks Toya to draw him as well. After fulfilling the king's request, Toya lies exhausted in the hallway, but a walking teddy bear suddenly arrives and leads him to a room where he meets an elegant lady who glazes him for defeating a dragon. She then introduces herself as an elder of the fairy folk named Lean, and her teddy bear is Paula, before revealing that she's over 600 years old. Toya asks if the teddy bear is a summoned beast, but she explains that it's a regular teddy bear, which is only moving thanks to her null magic named program. When Toya asks what it does, she reveals that it can make an inanimate object operate and obey some commands input into it. To demonstrate this, she uses her magic to make a chair move towards him after sitting on it, but when he asks if she can use it to make Paula fly, she says it's not possible since the program only allows simple commands. Toya then flexes once again by using the program spell to make the chair move, and he tells her he can use all magic elements, so she promises to let him explore her hairy cookie if he becomes her apprentice, but he immediately declines. The next morning, Toya transports the girls to the first using his gate spells, and Lindsay uses her water slicer spell to slice the dragon tooth into bits, so he uses it to create a gun with bullets. The girls are so amazed by it that they ask him to give them guns as well, so he makes some for them and enhances his own gun so that it can transform into a sword whenever he wants. On the way back, Kohaku informs Toya that some people are watching them from the top of a tower nearby, so he zooms in behind them using Excel and asks who they are, but they use a flashbang to escape. However, Toya finds them using his phone tracker and swiftly catches up to them before knocking them down with rubber bullets. After tying them up, Toya tries to search one of them for weapons, but his hands bounce on some juicy oranges, and he realizes that they're Lapis and Cecile. After taking off their masks, Lapis explains that they were sent as spies by the king to protect Yumina, and Cecile was the one who threw the knife during their dragon fight. They beg him to keep their identities secret from Yumina because she'd get mad at the king if he found out, and he agrees to do so. Days later, Toya uses his gate spell to set up a meeting between the kings of Belfast and Mismed, and Lean makes plans to visit Belfast. The next day, Toya and the girls return home using a gate spell, and Lapis secretly thanks him for allowing her and Cecile to return first, using the gate spell, so he explains that he did so to keep the secret from Yumina. He then lies down on his bed and looks through the photos he took of the girls during the trip before falling asleep. When Toya wakes up, he heads to the bathroom to clean up, but sees the girls wearing nothing but plot covers, so they freak out and scold him for not being careful. However, the Gunner can't hear a word they're saying because their outfits are partially open, giving him a clear view of their silky skin, but Yaha threatens to cut off his family jewels, so he apologizes for being a creep. Hours later, Toya uses his modeling spell to make some tires in the yard, but Alfred suddenly arrives and asks what he's doing. So he explains that he's making bicycles to allow people to move faster and cosplay Mumin Rider. When Alfred asks how long it would take, Toya says it would take him 30 minutes since it's his first try. After he makes one, Alfred tries to take it for a ride, but he falls like a royal doofus. Liam tries to help him up, but Alfred tells him to stay back before trying once again, and watching him makes the girls interested in the bicycles. However, Elsa collapses on her first attempt at riding one, and as Toya teaches Lindsay, Yumina rides the bicycle perfectly around the field, so he rewards her with a head pat. This makes Lindsay jealous, so she rides her bicycle ahead as well, and Elsa matches her energy on the bicycle, so Toya praises both of them. As they ride away, Toya is shocked that they suddenly became masters, so Yumina explains that it's because they're competing for the first bounce on his joystick. Hearing this, Ye chases after them to join the race, but Alfred suddenly zooms in front of everyone, and the shockwave makes the sisters collide. Albert then asks Toya to make a smaller bicycle for Sue and promises to pay him a handsome amount for it, so Toya heads out to buy the equipment. On the way, he sees some thugs beating up a boy for pickpocketing, and just when they're about to poke holes in him, Toya intervenes the American way by shooting the ugly bozos down with a gun. As Toya walks away, the boy thanks him for saving his life, but his stomach suddenly starts growling, and he confesses that he hasn't eaten in 3 days, so Toya offers to buy him something to eat. However, as he runs towards Toya, his hat flies away, revealing his long hair, which makes Toya realize that it's actually a girl, and she introduces herself as Ren. Shortly afterwards, Ren is feasting on some snacks, and Toya asks where she lives, so she explains that she sleeps in parks and dark alleys because she doesn't have a home. When he asks about her parents, she explains that her dad never came back after leaving a year ago to fight Sukuna, and her mom died shortly after she was born. Hearing this, Toya pats her on the head while offering her a chance to work at his place, and promises her that she'll never have to worry about food or money anymore, but he sets the condition that she should never pickpocket again, so she agrees to move in with him. Some hours later, Ren puts on a maid outfit at home that makes all the girls gawk over her, and Liam explains that she has to call Toya master since she's now one of his workers, before Cecile takes her away to train her. However, Yae asks Toya about the materials for the bicycle, and that's when the idiot realizes that he forgot. Later that day, Toya is chilling in town with Yumina and Sua, and the girls spot Alma nearby, so Toya calls out to her. When she meets up with them, Yumina introduces her to Sue, and Toya shows them that Lion is on a date with Orega, so the busybodies rush after them. While spying on them, they notice that Lion is struggling, but Sue doesn't fully grasp the situation, so Toya explains that Lion wants to hold her hand, but he doesn't have the marbles to go through with it. Yumina angrily asks why men don't just take women's hands, so Toya explains that it's something embarrassing. The lovebirds enter a restaurant, and the girls realize that they'd be discovered if they follow them inside, so they ask Toya to do something. He complains that he doesn't want to take the peeping any further, but Alma tells him that it's the first chance of getting laid her sister has gotten in years, so he activates his long sense spell, which displays the live video of Lion and Orega's date on his phone. While watching them, Alma is happy that her sister looks happy, and the princesses start yapping about their plans to go on a date together. However, the lovebirds step out of the restaurant, and Alma tries to chase after them but ends up colliding with a man wearing a cloak. As they check on her, they see that the man is Arnold, and he joins them in eavesdropping on the date, so Toya asks what he's doing there. Arnold explains that he often visits the town to clear his head, and he criticizes Lion for not being bold enough to put his hands around Orega during their date. Suddenly, some thugs start bullying a merchant, so Lion steps up and scolds the scumbags for bullying, and the girls start hyping him up as the new Jon Snow. However, the thugs pull out knives to poke holes in him, and Toya realizes that he'll be caught if he jumps out to save him, so he puts on a mask and knocks out the bad guys along with the Beast King. Unfortunately, Lion sees through his crappy disguise, so he scolds Lion for not being serious about expressing his feelings to Orega, and he boldly says that he wants to date Orega. However, Toya reveals that Orega is right behind him, and when he looks at her, she agrees to be his girlfriend, so everyone celebrates him like he's won the Ballon d'Or. When they return home, Lean arrives with Charlotte and explains that she came to research some things, so Toya introduces her to Yumina, and she flexes her fairy wings to prove her background. Lean says she's there to talk about the crystal monster they fought in the ruins, and narrates how she and her squad ran into a similar monster after it annihilated a particular village. She then hands him a drawing while revealing that it fell from a crack in the sky, but Toya is surprised that it has a different shape than the one he fought. After giving them some more information about the monster, she informs Toya that she'll be staying at his mansion and asks him to take her to Ishin using the gate in exchange for teaching him a null spell with mind-reading abilities named Recall. She then guides Toya in using the Recall spell on Yae, and after getting a clear view of Ishin, he transports them there using gate. Toya asks Lean for the location of the Neria ruins she wants to visit, but she says she doesn't know, and Yae presumes that her father would know, so Lean drags her ahead to meet her dad. They soon arrive at the edge of a cliff, and Yae informs them that the beautiful town below is her hometown, Oedo. As they walk through the street, Toya asks Yae if Ishin has a king, so she explains that it's technically true because each region is governed by a lord, and the lord of Oedo is a guy named Tokugawa. The girls don't understand why the people around are wearing wooden slippers, so Toya explains to them that it's a traditional footwear called geta, and Yae is amazed that he knows so much about her culture despite being a foreigner. When they arrive at Yae's home, her sister, Ayana, greets her with a warm hug and calls their mom, who embraces Yae as well before asking about Toya and the others. Yae explains that they're her comrades who have helped her in many ways, so her mom and Ayane bow in gratitude. When she asks about her father, her mom informs her that he's joined Tokugawa on the battlefield against an army called the Takedas, who mobilized several days ago. However, Ayane drops the unfortunate news that the battle isn't going in their favor because it's only a matter of time before their fortress falls, and when Yae asks about her father and brother, they silently bow their heads in sadness, so Yae asks Toya to use Recall again. He immediately agrees to help her, and Lean decides to put her mission on hold to assist as well, so Toya promises Yae's mom that he'll bring back her husband and son. Afterwards, Toya transports them to the forest, and while checking his phone, he tells Yae that her brother is safe, which makes her happy. Yae decides that they should rush to his aid immediately, but Lean stops her and reminds her that the journey itself is dangerous because her wings are too worn out to fly them there, which makes her depressed. However, Toya tells her that he'll use his long sense to scan the area from a distance and then jump there with gate, and once he gets into the fortress, he'll link up with that spot using the gate again. Lean agrees that it's a safe plan, so he teleports there but sees the enemy soldiers marching towards the fortress like zombies. In the fortress, a soldier informs Yae's brother, Jutaro, that they can't hold the enemy back because they keep respawning when they unalive them, but he also mentions a rumor that the monsters stop when their mask breaks. Just then, Toya walks in through a portal, and Jutaro tries to split his empty skull, thinking he's a Trojan horse, but Toya explains that he's Yae's friend, who came there to help him. When he mentions that Yae is around, Jutaro asks to see her, so Toya opens up a gate, which Yae runs through before hugging her brother. As the others arrive, Jutaro asks who they are, so Yae introduces them as her reliable comrades before asking about their dad, and Jutaro tells her not to worry because he's currently guarding Lord Tokugawa. This makes her feel relieved, but Toya notices that the room is filled with injured people, so he makes an isekai Wi-Fi connection with his phone, which allows him to simultaneously heal all of them at once. Toya then asks about the demon masks the enemy soldiers were wearing, but Jutaro says he doesn't know much about them other than the rumor about the monsters stopping when the masks break. However, Toya decides to eliminate all the masks at once, so he pinpoints the location of all the enemy soldiers using his phone and sends a barrage of lightning spells, targeting those exact locations, which successfully knock out all the undead monsters. Soon after, the gang meet up with Lord Tokugawa, who thanks them for their help and asks about Toya, so Yumina introduces him as her guard and future husband. As Toya tries to deny it, the blondie gives him a bombastic side-eye, which makes him shut up. Toya then asks about the Takeda army, so Tokugawa explains that their dark strategist, Yamamoto, is commanding an army of the dead, and Lean guesses that he's using an artifact or magic to achieve this. When Toya asks if they can stop them by capturing him, Tokugawa admits that they can, but informs him that the evil mastermind is in their main camp, which is in an unknown location. However, a ninja girl suddenly jumps into the room and hands Tokugawa a secret message before introducing herself as Tsubaki, a servant to one of Takeda's main generals named Kosaka. While reading the message, Tokugawa informs them that the other main generals of Takegawa have been thrown into an underground prison, and Kosaka wanted them to save the Takedas by stopping the evil mastermind. Tsubaki informs them that Kosaka is only pretending to serve Yamamoto in hopes of reclaiming the Takeda clan, and Tokugawa refuses to help because he has no obligation to, but Toya tells them to leave it to him. Tokugawa reminds him that he'll be heading straight into the dangerous enemy camp, so Toya decides to take advantage of Lean's invisibility spell and go there with her and Tsubaki. When they arrive at the enemy camp, Lean casts her invisibility spell on Toya, and he tries to get inside their fortress using a gate, but it doesn't work, so Lean explains that they've set up a barrier inside to block any unfamiliar forces from entering. Toya then suggests transporting Tsubaki instead since she's one of their men, but Lean suddenly starts playing with their plots, so Toya bonks her on the head. Minutes later, they arrive at the prison, and Toya frees Kosaka and the other generals before telling them his plan to capture Yamamoto. Toya then tries to track Yamamoto, but it doesn't work because of the barrier, so the generals lead him to the talisman, holding it up, and he destroys it with a gunshot before annihilating all the masked soldiers around with lightning spells. Afterwards, Toya transports them to Yamamoto's base, and a general tries to attack him, but a possessed version of Lord Takeda overwhelms them. However, Toya shuts him down by shooting his mask, and just when Yamamoto starts monologuing about his next big evil plan, he snatches the evil moron's artifact and destroys it, causing Yamamoto to crumble to dust. The next morning, Yae says farewell to her parents, and Toya transports his team to a beautiful beach. As the girls play around, Toya finds the location of the ruins they plan on exploring, but Elze suggests that they go back to Belfast to buy some swimsuits before returning to the beach. Toya isn't comfortable with diverting from their original mission, but Lean says she doesn't mind so long as the others will help with her investigation, so Toya officially decides that they should kickstart their beach episode. Sometime later, all the nobles and servants arrive at the beach, and the sisters complain that there's nowhere for them to change into their swimsuits, so Toya creates some tents for them along with OK items. While changing, Elze and Yumina are drowning in jealousy at the sight of the weapons of mass destruction that the other girls are packing in their swimsuits, and Lean rage-abates Elze by calling Linze the true elder sister. When they meet Toya, he compliments their look, but he can't keep his head straight because of all the juicy cakes in front of him. Elze and Yae start playing around in the water, and Toya watches intensely as their plots collide like a typical gooner, but Lindsay interrupts by telling him that she can't swim, so he suggests that she chill in the tent. Just then, Sue and Ren arrive in their swimsuits and ask what he thinks, so he tells them they look cute and pats them on the head before taking a photo of them. After they run off, Cecile suddenly appears behind Toya, and this startles him, so she explains that it's a habit from her day job, but bro can't take his eyes off her oversized milk factories. She makes things even harder for him by bouncing them around in front of him while explaining that she had a hard time finding the right size of swimsuit, and as she runs away, Toya watches her plots bounce and wonders if they could float in water. Suddenly, Lapis appears behind him, causing him to scream like a moron, and he asks her about the tray she's holding, so she explains that she's doing her job by serving drinks to the royal ladies. Toya suggests that she has some fun as well, but she tells him not to worry because she's switching turns with Cecil. Once she leaves, Toya notices that the king and Alfred are having an intense swimming race in the water, and he's happy that they still have so much energy. After resting in a tent for a while, Toya decides to head out, but Yumina suddenly arrives, showcasing her white swimsuit, and he tells her she looks cute, so she invites him to crack her underwater. However, Toya says he wants to try searching for the ruins a bit and promises to join her after he's done, so she promises to wait for him and runs away. When Lean arrives, Toya is surprised that Paula is all dressed up to swim, so Lean explains that she won't get wet or moldy because she has a magical protection on her, and Toya activates the protection spell to secure himself as well. As they prepare to begin their investigation, Lean tells Toya that she isn't going to swim because she doesn't want to get drenched. So Toya dives in with Paula and swims towards the underground ruins. However, he starts to run out of breath, so he swims back up and tells Lean that he found the entrance to the ruins. Toya then asks if there's a spell that would let them function underwater, but Lean says she never bothered to learn it and calls Charlotte to ask her about it. However, Charlotte doesn't know the spell as well, so Lean grabs her cakes as punishment, but Kohaku reveals that there's a spirit that could solve all their problems. Lean then prepares a magic circle for the summoning spell, but brings up the fact that they typically can't summon a specific individual with summoning magic, so Kohaku explains that she'll get the spirit to answer her call by mixing her magic with Toya's. However, she warns Toya to be careful since she doesn't know what they'd asked for in return, and Toya asks why she keeps referring to them as they, so she explains that a Gente spirit is a two-in-one being. As Kohaku pours her magic into the circle, Toya says the incantation for the summoning spell, which summons a spirit that's an odd fusion of a turtle and a snake. The spirit, Gente, asks Kohaku about Toya, so she introduces him as her master, but they're disappointed that he looks like an NPC, so they decide to test him to see if he's worthy of taming them. They challenge him to a fight, and the condition is that they'd allow him to tame them if he manages to stay standing by sundown that day, so Toya immediately agrees. As Toya walks towards them, they're surprised by how confident he is, but he suddenly activates the slip spell, which makes them fall, and fires an enchanted bullet, which traps them in an infinite loop of slips. Eventually, Gente starts crying that their brain is getting scrambled, so Toya frees them from the slip loop, and they permit him to forge a pact with them. Just like Kohaku, they ask him to give them names, so he names the snake Kokuyu and the turtle Sango, and they cheerfully accept the names. However, Kohaku informs them that their current forms will cause problems for Toya, so they transform into a portable version and promise to be helpful to him. Afterwards, Toya meets up with the girls, who accuse him of gooning to their swimsuit photos, and he tries to deny the accusations, but that goes down the drain when his phone falls and shows the photo of Sue and Ren in their swimsuits together. Despite this, Yumina chooses to believe him, and she drags him to the ocean, where he plays with the rest of the girls. Later that evening, Kokuyu and Sango cover Toya in a barrier, allowing him to walk freely underwater into the ruins. There, he finds a strange object, and once he pours magic into it, he's suddenly transported to a strange forest, where he meets a girl named Francesca, who is going commando for some reason. Toya is spooked by the sight of her hairy kitten, so he looks away while begging her to wear some peach protectors, but she jokingly asks him to play with it before finally putting on a skirt. He then asks where they are, so she informs him that they're in the Garden of Babylon, which is floating in the sky, and asks him to follow her. While walking ahead, he asks about the purpose of the facility, so she explains that a professor named Regina built it as a hobby. The Gente spirits warn Toya that Francesca isn't human because they can't sense the flow of life in her, so Francesca reveals that she was built over 5,000 years ago by the professor to serve as the garden's control terminal. Toya is shocked that she's a machine, but she explains that she's not completely a RoboCop because she has some biological parts that were created with magic, and then adds that she's the perfect pleasure doll since she can't have any offspring. While staring at the facility, he asks her if it's ever malfunctioned during the 1,000 years of its creation, so she explains that all parts of it have been reinforced with magic, and she's on standby, except in emergencies, because the garden's maintenance is automatic. When he asks why she's out, she says it's an emergency because a Gunnar just invaded the garden, but after he introduces himself, she claims that he's compatible to be her master and offers herself to him. This confuses him, so she explains that the circle that teleported him there only reacts to people like her master and the Avatar, who have mastered all elements, and the professor decided to pass her on to anyone capable of passing through the magic circle. However, she claims that she also sees him fit to be her master, because he asked her earlier to cover up instead of giving in to his weird urges, and if he'd have taken her bait, she'd have kicked him into outer space. Toya is surprised that the commando thing was that deep, so she explains that the tease is to determine whether someone is kind and considerate enough to be in charge of them, and the professor puts the final decision in their hands. But Toya concludes that the professor is as crazy as Hisoka. She then asks him to treat her nicely as her new master, but he feels that his life is about to get messier. At the beach, the girls are playing around, but Charlotte suddenly slips, and a water wave splashes over her. As the girls check on her, they see a tiny crab stuck inside her large melons, so they start complaining about how the plot gods abandoned them until Lean reminds Charlotte that she has work to do. The girls start talking about how they're worried for Toya since he's been gone for a while, but Toya suddenly appears in a gate and apologizes for the delay. When he takes them to the garden, the girls are shocked that it looks prettier than Disneyland, but Lean says it looks like the ancient Parthenon civilization, which is an advanced civilization created with many magic spells and magical devices. Lean then accuses Toya of hiring a fan service girl, so he explains that Francesca is a girl in charge of the garden, but she tells them that Toya is her master and beloved husband, which makes the girls suspicious of him. To make matters worse, she brings up how she went commando just for him, so Lindsay tells him to get on his knees and scolds him for ditching all the plots they offered him on a silver platter to cheat with a robot girl. However, Yumina suggests that the girls take a stroll to calm things down, so they walk around the garden together, talking about how nice Toya is, but Yumina stops them and reminds them of what they discussed when they first moved into the mansion. Back then, Yumina pointed out that they all like Toya, and they all try to deny it, even though their faces are glowing red, so Yumina calls out all the different ways they've been simping for him. She claimed she was happy that Toya had loyal comrades who would do anything for him, but Elsa said it was weird that she wasn't bothered by it, so Yumina explained that she didn't want to tie him down because she knew they'd help him accomplish great things, and then proposed that they all become his wives. This made the girls even more flustered, so she decided that they should shelve the discussion until their feelings had settled. Back in the present, Yumina asks the girls if they have feelings for Toya, and they all admit that they do, so she proposes that they all become Toya's wives again. However, the airheads start losing their minds as they imagine the different positions that Toya would crack them in on their honeymoon. Meanwhile, Lean tells the others that she's happy with what she found in the ruins, even if it's not a new spell as she expected, because the garden itself is an array of ancient magic, and Toya realizes that Regina was the Einstein of magic. Francesca reveals that several areas are drifting in the sky just like that garden, which are being managed by her sisters, and they all make up the Babylon that Regina created. Just then, the girls return, and Toya asks why their faces look like chili bottles, but they tell him that it's nothing. As they sit, Francesca explains that Babylon is protected by magic barriers that prevent recognition from outsiders, meaning it can't be perceived by strangers. But when Lean asks if she can make contact with the other floating islands, she says she can't because the connection has been severed. Lindsay suggests trying with Toya's smartphone, but when he tries, nothing happens, so Lean concludes that the only way to find each Babylon is to search for their teleportation circles. When Lean asks what they could do with Francesca, Toya asks Francesca what she wants, and she says she wants to stay with him, but before that, she has to complete his registration as her master. Suddenly, Francesca gives Toya the sloppiest kiss imaginable, causing the girls to freak out, and afterwards, she announces that the registration is complete. However, Lindsay tells Toya that she loves him and kisses him as well, causing everyone to freak out. A while later, Francesca is all dressed up in a maid outfit at the mansion, and Toya asks Liam to take care of her, but she immediately starts making her own rules. So Toya walks away to avoid the drama. While lying on his bed, Toya remembers Lindsay's sudden love, confession, and kiss, and he starts to freak out until Yumin arrives to check on him. She suddenly starts crashing out about the fact that two women have stolen a kiss from him when she's yet to taste his lips, but he's confused that she isn't upset over Lindsay's love confession, so she calls him an idiot for not seeing that Lindsay clearly loved him all this time. Yumina says that she won't complain, even if he takes 20 wives, because she knows his white sauce is enough to feed all of them, but she's upset that he was careless enough to let two other baddies kiss him before his actual wife. After he apologizes, she sits beside him and says she'll forgive him if he hugs and kisses her, so he pulls her close and gives her a warm kiss. This makes her happy because she's the first person he's willingly kissing by himself, but she asks what he thinks about Lindsay, so he admits that he likes her. However, Yumina suddenly calls out to Lindsay, and she suddenly appears in the room, but this confuses Toya. So Yumina explains that she asked Lean to cast an invisibility spell on Lindsay because he was too chicken to give her. She also mentions that Lindsay had been crying because she feels that Toya hates her, so he apologizes to her, but with tears flowing from her eyes, she apologizes as well for not considering his feelings. Seeing this, Toya calms her down by admitting once again that he likes her, and this makes her smile. So Yumina asks Toya to take her as a bride and reminds him that it's normal for nobles to have multiple wives. When she asks Lindsay if she's okay with it, Lindsay nods in approval and tells Toya that she wants to be his wife, so he agrees to take both of them as wives and hugs them. He then asks them to go to their room since it's getting close to his gooning hours, but they ask him for a goodnight kiss, so he smooches them on the head and sends them off. The next morning, Toya is sleeping peacefully on his bed, but Else crashes into his room and asks to talk to him. He follows her to the yard, where they meet Yae, and Else asks Toya if he truly loves Lindsay since he's taking her as a bride, so he admits that he cherishes her. Suddenly, she challenges him to a fight against both of them, claiming that she won't say anything if they lose, but if they win, he'll have to listen to a request from them. Yae informs him that she's taken the edge off her blade, but warns him that it can still break bones, and they ask him not to use modeling or any offensive spells during the match. Toya still doesn't understand what's going on, but he agrees to face them, but he agrees to the duel and uses modeling to change the ammunition in his gun to rubber bullets. As the girls charge at him, Toya changes his gun to blade mode and blocks a strike from Yae before evading another attack by Elze. Yae then throws a blade at him, but he dodges and turns his sword into gun mode and fires some bullets at her. Elze tries to punch him, but he slams her to the ground and tells her to give up. She calls him soft for not pulling the trigger on her, but claims that it's why she and Yae fell in love with him in the first place, which shocks him. As she powers up her gauntlet, Toya tries to shoot her, but notices that he's out of bullets, and his two deformed brain cells finally remember that Yae spilt all his bullets during their attack, so Elze knocks him out with a powerful punch. When he wakes up, both girls start shivering like idiots while confessing that they love him, but he doesn't fully understand them, so they ask him to accept them as his wives as well, since he lost the duel. Just then, Yumina arrives and explains to Toya that she was the one who set up everything because she wants all of them to be his wives, and when Elze asks for his response, he admits that he likes her, but begs them to give him more time to sort things out. Hours later, Toya is sitting at the fountain, and Francesca arrives, so he expresses his worries about how he could end up disappointing the girls as a husband, but she informs him that he has a message from Regina. She then hands him a charger, and once he plugs it into his phone, he sees a hologram image of Regina, who flashes him her black plot covers before explaining that she knows about him because she has a tool that lets her see the future, and she's been watching him all this time. Regina then explains that she once faced the strange crystal monsters called Phrase, and they destroyed the ancient civilization before suddenly disappearing, and she's now entrusting him with her Babylon to make up for spying on him. Afterwards, Toya uses a portal to visit God, who is eating some snacks while watching that horrible Euphoria finale, and he tells God about his situation with the girls. So God calls someone who he describes as an expert in romance to come over. Just then, a curvy baddie with pink hair arrives, and God introduces her as Cupid, the god of love, so he explains his situation to her as well. She advises him to accept all of them since he truly loves them, and it's what he truly loves, so he heads back home and tells Kohaku to call all the girls. Once they arrive, Toya tells them that he won't marry them, and they start freaking out, so he explains that he'll eventually marry all 4 of them, but he won't do it yet because he isn't mature enough to take responsibility for them. They all gleefully accept his proposal and ask him to seal the deal with a kiss, but when he tries to kiss Elze, she gets flustered and punches him in the stomach. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed and watch this video on screen.